I think a lot of times as HR, I think a lot of back office functions are guilty of this. We design to make things easier for us to manage than design for the user. So there was a lot of reminding that I had to do with my team. I would say, hold on, are we doing this because it's the way that we can manage it? So I used to kind of take that burden off their shoulders and say, don't worry about that part. That as a leader, I'll figure out how we're going to manage this. If we need more people, more tools, you design for the user.
You're listening to HR Superstars, a podcast brought to you by 15Five. On this show, we talk to strategic people leaders who are making a meaningful impact in their organizations and shaping the future of work. So get ready to be inspired and discover the secrets behind building high-performing teams and fostering a culture of growth and thriving. The future of HR starts here. I'm Karina Young, VP of People here at 15Five. And the reason why we brought this particular conversation together today is because a lot of what we call HR today is still built on frameworks really designed for a workplace that just doesn't exist anymore, right? Our survey responses are collecting dust. Performance reviews can feel more like theater than they do truth. And change models, ironically, have not changed very much in the recent past and certainly don't meet the pace and the way that we work today. At the same time, though, HR leaders are expected to deliver retention, performance, culture, and cost efficiency, all with fewer resources and higher expectations than ever, right? We need to be administrative and get the work done, and we need to be strategic and lead the business, but how do we do all of this? And that's why this conversation matters so much, because the future of HR is not coming, it's not on the way, it is actually here. And many leaders in HR are still just trying to catch up and stay on top of what's most important day to day, let alone think about what they should be doing or planning for in the future. So today, this is what we're going to dig into. We're going to dig into what it really takes to lead in this new era. How do we replace outdated tools, rethinking the role of a manager, and even tackling the bold idea that AI might already be better at some parts of our job than we are. And my guest today is Loren Blandon, future work strategist, fractional HR executive, and really just one of the clearest, funnest voices I've heard lately on what is the future of the HR function. So let's get into it. Loren, I'm going to hand it over to you. Tell us a little bit about you. Give us a kind of what I like to call your movie trailer intro to your journey in the world of HR.
Sure, that's going to be tough. But first, thank you so much. I'm really thrilled to be here and to be meeting with my fellow HR folks. I'm always excited to talk to my kind of brethren, right, about what's to come. So I've been in HR for about 18-ish years. I'm a organizational psychologist by kind of training and have, spanned various industries, tech, consumer goods, healthcare, and then spent the last 9 in advertising. And I've kind of zigzagged my way through HR from generalist role into center of excellence. So I've been chief people officer, and I've also been global head of OD, talent management, L&D. Have run the gamut. And over the last 8 months, I kind of went off on my own. I started to get tapped a lot for, support and help on what the future of work looks like. And so I've been doing that work on a fractional basis and writing and speaking a ton on the subject. I think this is such an incredibly exciting time to be doing the work that we're doing. But there's a big but, which is we need to get our house in order and really get with it and make sure that we are part of this transformation and not being kind of pushed out.
Yeah, so I absolutely love that. And I guess let's talk a little bit first about change models. How do you see these traditional HR change models as being broken? And what do you think are some of the things that we just have to leave behind as we're cleaning house?
Yeah, this has been one of my major frustrations over the last few years. And I'll tell you why. I think one issue with previous change and traditional change models and my frustrations with it is that they were built at a time, VUCA was like a thing that everyone was throwing around in the kind of late 90s, early 2000s, when change and transformation was more, I guess, episodic in nature, where there was like a clear beginning and end, right? It was like a time period that we had to just get through and then move on. And it has very much become, a VUCA kind of situation has become a trait and not a state. So now that it's a constant, we can't approach change as this one time, right? What do we want to get out of this? And then go through these formulaic steps and then think that we're going to see our way on the other end. Now it's just a way of operating, right? It's kind of just oxygen. At the same time, I was going into the world of advertising 8 years ago, stepping into that industry for the first time. And while I looked at HR taking this very traditional stepwise approach to change, I'm looking at the folks across my organization. I worked for the largest creative agency in the world. So our brands were people like Ford and Wendy's and just really big brands, right? Coca-Cola. I'm looking at them and saying, they're essentially kind of doing the same thing, right? They're trying to reach out to the masses and get them to do something, right? Exhibit some sort of behavior, get on board emotionally and right with, and exude loyalty to a brand, right? Instead of an employer. But essentially we were all doing the same thing. And I was like, well, they're doing a hell of a lot better job than we are, right? And they're not using the same approach, right? They're not taking this paternalistic approach to change, expecting people to dig their heels and throw tantrums and coddle them through it. They're just like, how do we make this seem really cool and get people's attention and make them want to be a part of this and almost drive a more intrinsic, like grassroots kind of approach to change. And so when I saw that, I was like, why aren't we doing that, right? Why aren't we pulling from their playbooks? And that's really what sparked this aha moment for me, where I started kind of copying their methodologies, how they communicate, how they really closely and intimately understood the end user and what their experience was like and the touch points and the gaps. There's so much there to unpack that I write about all the time. But when I looked towards their methods and modalities for driving and inspiring change, it's what made me realize that we needed to do things fundamentally differently.
Yeah, well, it reminds me a lot of what I think a lot of HR leaders are talking about now, which is treating the people function like a product, right? Mm-hmm. Like to your point, really deeply understanding who is that end user, right? Creating the personas that we have within our functions and then designing for like that ultimate great solution instead of designing for the actual change you're doing. Like, what if the outcome were this? And like, this was the goal we were working toward. So that definitely really resonates a lot. Was there anything else that felt like a hallmark trait when you looked at these brands that you wanted to emulate in HR, or that felt like it could really transform how change was felt by employees?
Yeah, I think, when we look at how really great brands are operating, and I think what the really cool thing about social media is that it's giving us a front row seat to, if you sort of look behind the layers and see the patterns and what they're doing, you realize that there's this very clear kind of method, right? Where number one, I always say, don't try to be everything to everyone. That's something that all really strong brands that have that affinity and that following and that loyalty, they understand who they're trying to speak to and who they're not. And they stick to it and they reach them in all aspects of their life. They focus more on being seen as a kind of lifestyle and aspiration versus the product or service, right? They're just kind of like, here's the general, it's almost right, the word vibe. Here's the general vibe or feeling or aesthetic that you're going to join in using our thing, whether that's a shoe or a makeup line, right? The product or service almost becomes a little bit irrelevant. It's more you're joining this movement or this idea or this theology. So when you start looking at the way that the really big, powerful brands move through the ecosystem and through the zeitgeist, you start picking out like, oh, okay, then that's what I need to start doing. And a lot of times, if you just apply those same approaches internally and say, okay, it's, we're applying it specifically within the framework of work, but it's really the same thing that we're all trying to do.
Yeah. Well, it's so interesting because I think there's a lot of HR leaders who can take a compliance first approach as well, right? And instead of thinking about like, obviously, like, what is the vibe? What's the energy we're trying to build a culture, right? Things that we actually talk about all the time that we want to do. We want people to join this culture for the idea of it, to contribute. But what we end up often building is, well, I got to make sure that legal doesn't hound me on A, B, C, and D. And then like, maybe we'll get to that saying that aligns with a value. What are other ways that maybe you think that, I guess, have held HR back from letting go of these legacy systems or things that make it hard for us to really adopt something new and bold?
It's such a mixture of things. I think that we do have an element to our function where there's certain things that do need to be done for compliance, especially if you're like a publicly held company or, right, there's just certain things that we have to do. But then I feel that maybe sometimes we fall into those modalities or that approach and we apply it across the board. So, if you have your annual harassment training, something like that that the box just needs to be checked and it just needs to be done, we shouldn't take the same approach of how we mandate and track completion of those things versus things where we're really trying to get people's heart and minds bought in to some sort of transformation, right? We shouldn't be using the same approach, meaning the same kind of learning or the same kind of exposure, the same kind of tracking and communication. And, sometimes we'll we'll just get that kind of packaged approach, and then we'll just sprinkle on something like, oh, let's just gamify it or something and it's like, no, we need to redesign from the ground up. And when I had taken over our global L&D function at my last company, and I noticed that to some degree, we were doing this, right? We were just sort of doing run-of-the-mill training. And I started out by kind of mixing up the skill sets within my team. I actually started hiring UX designers instead of traditional instructional designers, just sort of mixing up the skill set, thinking very much like the product mindset, like you alluded to, which I'm so happy now when I go through LinkedIn, I hear everyone talk, it's really become a thing. And one of our challenges was, folks were not showing up to certain learning experiences that we wanted them to have. And it was thrown around, should we mandate this? Should we send out a note saying that they have to do this and then track it and then chase them down? And I'm like, no. If we're needing to do that, then we're not doing our job right? Meaning my team. Let's take that as a signal that we need to change our ways, not that we need to chase people down more, right?
So what did you do in that instance? I'm curious, because I imagine there are leaders out there thinking, well, isn't it their responsibility? Like, I do have to chase people down. Like, how do we fight the battle between getting people to do that work has to get done, the limited time we might have to do it? What's worked for you?
Yeah, two things to assess in those situations. The first one is just the operating system. A lot of times, the reason folks aren't showing up is just they weren't given the time to. In my case, we were a billable service. People were expected to be billable 100% of their time. So when the hell were they going to do this trade, right? So there are certain just kind of operational things that you need to make sure that you're carving out the time and space for them to actually execute what you're wanting them to do. The other side then becomes a design problem or a design challenge, right? Yeah. I'm a huge fan of human-centered design. I made all of my team go through extensive training on the human-centered design approach and thinking, kind of, CX and user experience, which is essentially just getting into the mindset of putting the end user in the center of everything that you're doing. I think a lot of times as HR, I think a lot of back office functions are guilty of this. We design to make things easier for us to manage than design for the user. So there was a lot of reminding that I had to do with my team. I would say, hold on, are we doing this because it's the way that we can manage it? So I used to kind of take that burden off their shoulders and say, don't worry about that part. That as a leader, I'll figure out how we're going to manage this. If we need more people, more tools, you design for the user, right? And that really changed the way then that and I would say things like go to market, right? How are we going to take this to market? How are we going to get people to actually care about this and not check a box when they're doing it? We started incorporating a lot of things, again, a node to the marketing team and what they were doing. I was stealing straight from, I would make things braggable. People love to be a part of things that they take pride in and feel that it gives them some kind of social equity, right? That they can go on Instagram and say, look at this really cool thing that I did at work today. So the degree to which you can make the experiences Instagrammable, memorable, relevant, then you have people just wanting to be a part of it instead of chasing them down.
I love all of those ideas. And I really love just the notion of putting the user, really our end user, our employees at the center of what we do. Because I certainly know that I've been in that same position. And I remember years ago, a leader giving me very similar advice to what you just said to your team. And they were actually a leader within the marketing and comms function. And when they said that, I was like, why would I do that? And then the more I thought about it, I was like, man, this is really going to change how people come and engage and interact. Like if you're having issues with people don't take our surveys and they don't want to participate in reviews and they don't want to do all these things, well, maybe it's because you didn't actually design it for them. Mm-hmm. Like think about the last thing somebody pitched to you or some commercial you saw that you were just like, not for me. Like if we start to really transform our mindset, we can really think about it differently. And I absolutely love your take on that. Another area I know that you are super passionate about is AI in the workplace. So you've talked a lot about AI as being a redefiner, not a replacement within the HR world. Can you tell us a little bit more about your thoughts behind that and where you think HR leaders are really just missing the AI conversation?
And I'll start off by saying I'm incredibly bullish on AI. I'm very optimistic and excited about the opportunities that it's going to open up. Also, being kind of a nerd on the history of work and seeing how, one time period that I reference a ton was the turn of the 20th century, right? And all of the technological advances and how some jobs that we couldn't ever imagine going away, went away, but then these new jobs that we also equally could never have imagined came up, right? And this story has repeated itself so many times in our history, yet when we encounter our own version of it, like we're living today, we act like it's the first time it's ever happened, right? So first, I want to remind everyone that this tale is old as time. What I think is maybe or quite different this time is the speed at which it's happening, right? And so it's almost like we're trying to just wrap our brains around it while it's all just unfolding very quickly. But it's an exciting time. What I find most folks are doing right now, which is a natural part of the kind of the growth and acceptance process, is we are taking AI and we're trying to slot it into our existing system structures, way of operating, just life as it is. We're like, where can I fit this, right? Like, where does it, what tit for tat kind of swap out can I do with AI? And I suppose that's a necessary first step to understand how it works before true transformation happens. But I try to remind folks that first, if we're having conversations purely about what jobs in their entirety are going to be replaced versus not, we're missing the boat, because the reality is that what's going to happen is somewhere in the middle, right? Most jobs are just going to change fundamentally in scope, how and where we spend our time in those jobs, what kind of skill sets we need to bring to those jobs. So to me, it's really not a question of so much of what's being replaced fully versus not. It's more, how is all of this going to change? And one thing too that I would suggest is before we even start talking about that in terms of jobs, we need to back up further and say, how is this impacting fundamentally the business that I'm working in, and how we have to show up, and how, right, our product or service and how we're going to market, and then figure out the job part.
Oh, well, and it's not too dissimilar to what you were saying earlier too, and just generally about changes. Instead of just figuring out how can I do this the same way I've done it before and throw the gamification on top of it, like how do I just go in and like replace this exact thing and make it fit? It is really being able to take the time and space to rethink the whole landscape of how the whole organization is going to work, and then really figure out, okay, where does a people function slot into enabling all of this? Because the skills that our people are going to need, that our business is going to need us to drive to get to the right results, will be completely different. And that can feel, I think, overwhelming for a lot of people. Just like, well, what if I don't know the answers to this? What kind of advice would you give to leaders who feel like they don't even know where to start, or like the train is moving so fast, they're just trying to hang on to the back rail?
Yeah. This is what I've been telling people. And first, I do want to acknowledge that the uncertainty and to some degree, the fear is very real. I talk about the future of work in AI a ton on LinkedIn, on Instagram. And if I just comb through the comments, right, that folks, the conversations that are happening kind of in the comments to the things I post, it's pretty, it's a striking reminder of where people are at, right? There's a lot of uncertainty, and it crosses generations. You have people that are still in school saying, by the time I get out with my degree, is this even going to be relevant anymore? What is the job market going to look like for me? They're terrified of what they're going to face. You have folks in mid-career saying, is it too late for me to pivot? What's going to happen to me? So, this isn't affecting one bucket. It's almost even to the playing field in terms of this is new green space for all of us, right? We're all starting from scratch. I see that as a positive because I'm like, hey, we're all in this together. We're all figuring this out. We have to get really comfortable with this new iterative way of just being, of not having the full answer or the end before taking the first step. Because I think that we had the luxury in prior generations or times of work where we could plan out the end and then start our journey towards it. And now it's like, well, now we just need to start and not know what the end looks like. And that's incredibly uncomfortable for most people. But I think that's just going to be the new way of moving, right? We're just going to have to start. When we figure out that that's taking us the wrong way, we pivot again. So I'm trying to encourage folks to just start exercising that muscle and get very comfortable with just not making it up as we go along, because that feels like it lacks intention and expertise, but being, I guess, very agile and adaptable.
HR has changed from support function to strategic powerhouse, but traditional HR software hasn't caught up. 15Five's performance management platform helps your HR team discover where to take action and make a business impact. Find out how to maximize employee performance, engagement, and retention at 15five.com or click the link in the show notes.
Exactly. Well, I know there's some places in it that you might be making it up as you go along, right? You might be in a position where you're like, I'm just going to really try and experiment maybe create my own hypothesis about what I think this is going to be outcome is being. I'm just going to learn from it. It's like you were talking about in the beginning, where change in general has become a trait, not just a state. Like we are living in a world that there is constant levels of change happening all the time. And AI is like just one of those, like a very big one of those, very complex and impacting many areas of our life. But it is just like, this is just what life is going to be like from now on. Like the way in which change is going to happen to us, to our jobs, to our environments is just more rapid. So the quicker that we can get on board with, I'm going to find my way in this flow, like I can ride this wave, even if I don't totally know how it's going to end. I think the less stress and anxiety and the more open we become to figuring things out and trying something different.
Totally. And I would say this, don't take on that burden on by yourself. This isn't only HR's burden to carry. And I know that we feel that weight a lot of times when things are happening and we're like, okay, how do I fix this? How do I make this better for people? What I have found, and especially younger generations, people are incredibly scrappy at figuring things out. I always use this example about, I don't know, it's maybe been 9 months now when TikTok went dark, right? When there was that whole debate on whether or not people were going to have access to it or not, and they shut it off. Over the course of those 48 hours that people didn't have access to TikTok, there was something like, I don't know, 1 million downloads of Duolingo because people were already teaching themselves Mandarin so they could use the alternative app, right? So when there's something in it for folks, when they're bought in, right? When they really want to be a part of something, they will, like the grassroots efforts that will rally around making that change happen is far beyond, exponentially more than we can do as a function on our own. And so that's why I say, think about how we can just get hearts and minds bought in versus try to over-engineer ourselves.
Yeah. And sometimes when it comes to getting hearts and minds bought in, it's also doesn't have to be your voice. I think one of the most powerful ways an HR function can drive change is letting other people do it, take the lead, giving them some freedom of these are some of the drivers I'm trying to change within our culture right now. Here's some of the data, but you're an employee like other employees. Why don't you go try it and see what happens? And when they do find that thing.
Yes. I'm so glad that you brought it up because that's critically important. But this is one big change that I made amongst my team. I said, people don't want to hear from us, right? We know what people think about HR. They don't want to hear from us. And at the same time, what we're seeing, if you look through social media, the folks that people are listening to aren't necessarily the traditional experts, right? They're not the credentialed folks or the ones that, right? It's the people that are really effective at building trust and storytelling and just gaining an audience and making people feel heard. They're the ones with the loudest microphone. So we have these influencers, right, in this space. And I said across our organization, we also have influencers. We have people that not because of their job or title, but just there's something about them that people trust them, listen to them. So we kind of dubbed this the word learnfluencer. And we're like, okay, we're going to build the experience. And then we're going to identify who are these learnfluencers throughout the organization and give them the microphone, give them the stage. It was a tremendous win-win because those folks normally love that visibility and to have that impact. And so they were out, spreading the gospel. People listened to them, right? And we were sort of Wizard of Oz behind the scenes, creating the whole experience behind it. And it was so much more impactful and effective.
So much more. Yeah. We used to call them at a past company of mine, culture canaries. And it was just like, you go out and help get people on board because, you have to be able to drop your ego in HR for a minute that like people do have a perception of me, of what we do, even if they trust you, they know you. It's okay for us not to be at the front of all these initiatives. Getting that braggable energy, that hearts and minds, that intrinsic motivation can come from outside of us, and it's totally okay. That's actually a really strategic use of your time and energy and your people. It's like, what a great way to deepen engagement, then get these people bought into your programs and helping others. Like it's just exponentially more effective.
Well, and the way that you can scale too, because when we were out there facilitating things, right, there was only a handful of us. Now we had dozens of folks out there.
Yeah.
So
who want to do it. Surveys, feedback, performance, all these HR rituals that we are doing now that maybe also feel like they were built for another time and place and work situation. How do you see some of those things changing now with AI and just in a more data-rich world?
I am incredibly excited about what AI is finally going to allow us to do in terms of getting really deep, meaningful insights about our people. I think, for a long time, just the methodologies of employee listening was employee surveys, right? Like your typical annual sort of sentiment survey. And they were tremendously flawed. They always have been. as an org psychologist, a big part of what we're trained to do is build assessment. So first, we understand that there's very much a science behind building, valid and reliable assessments. And a lot of times the surveys that we would see out there didn't follow those rules, which could, make you want to yank your hair out. But even then, it was incredibly problematic in that a lot of times folks, what they say is fundamentally different than what they do. Right? We all have a self-concept of how we like to see ourselves. So that impacts how we're going to, respond to these surveys. And obviously too, we may be trying to manipulate the system a little bit. Like the lowest scoring item on a survey anywhere I've ever worked has been, do you feel that you're paid, enough or fairly? No one, right? We all want to say no because we all want to raise. So I think AI is finally going to enable us to really effectively turn on more passive observation than right out asking folks. And, the kind of examples, again, I'm going to pull from marketing. If you were to ask people things like, how important is health to you, right? In your life, how important is it that you're healthy? And people will say, of course, 10 out of 10, right? The health is everything. But they haven't, eaten a vegetable or gone to the gym in 4 years, right? So that's an example that I love to give. The other one is if you ask folks, how important is sustainability, right? In the environment and caring for the future of the environment? Of course, 10 out of 10. Well, those folks are ordering pounds of clothes, of fast fashion from Shein, right? So there are so many examples out there that we find that what folks say doesn't match up with what they're doing and how they're behaving. But when we watch what they do, when we can have more eyes and ears observing how it is that they're spending their time, what they actually value, what they do in their day-to-day, who they're talking to, what questions they're asking. So, and sometimes I'm hesitant when I describe this future of employee listening because it sounds a little bit big brother. But when we have AI now very closely embedded into our workflows, it's editing our emails, it's listening into our meetings, it's sitting in on all of these things. All of a sudden, it's able to start parsing out a level of detail and information that we didn't have access to before. That is going to truly tell us, right, who are the connectors in this organization? What are the kinds of questions that are sitting on people's minds? At my last organization, we implemented an AI coach. And now in that particular tool, it was confidential between employee, we couldn't pull information, but these companies like BetterUp, Valence that are offering this AI coaching, on their end, they're going to be sitting on a mound of incredibly rich, just gold in employee insights, right? That they're not going to be able to report specific, this person said this, but they're going to be able to report out Instagram level insights into behavior, but specifically within the world of work. So I think that we're going to start peeling back a lot of layers that we've been making assumptions about for all this time and finally get some answers.
Yeah, I absolutely love it. When I think the AI coaching, we even have that within our platform at 15.5. And it's interesting talking to HR executives who use that and then being like, well, some managers want to use it, some managers don't, they're still not sure. I actually think that very quickly, a lot of our concerns and wonders about what is AI doing, what's going to do with this information are going to slowly tumble away because we're going to start to see how incredibly effective it is. We spend a lot of time. I spend time on webinars talking about the complexity of a manager role. You got to do everything and then some at the same pay you were getting as an IC. So why wouldn't you use AI to make your life actually easier and your job more effective? Like you have to clearly have trust with the organization. You as a company and as a people team need to prove that you are not using that information in an unnecessarily punitive way. But it's actually going to make all the things that we do manageable. Like when we say do more with less, which I hate that saying, but you can actually do more with less of your personal energy being expended. I don't need to take meeting one-on-one notes because that can be done for me. And I can be totally in the conversation with just you and me. That's a human value add that AI is going to take, you take the administrative work AI because I need to create this relationship and this one-on-one, and I really have to nail the conversation. It's so hard to do today when we have to just manage everything on our own. And I think what you were saying too about the surveys, being able to find a way to gather real-time sentiment. I always find that when I take an engagement survey, it's always hard, right? Because we're the teams that create it, but the question comes up and I'm like, I feel okay. Like if I feel okay about it on the day, I'll never remember my feedback. And then the survey closes and I was like, that's what I wanted to say. Like I wanted to add this one thing. And it can be really challenging just to capture people's mental capacity and energy. So trying to find ways that are fit into the flow of work and help bring those insights to actually better your organization and better your company is really where we've got to try to push ourselves.
Yeah. And imagine having that level, because again, one of the big falls that we all know about, annual sentiment surveys, even if they're quarterly, it's a snapshot in time, right? Did we happen to launch that survey on the week that we announced a huge organizational change? Or even outside the organ, did we announce it when something, politically was happening in the country where we're located that had everyone feeling really down in the dumps that day, right? So if you can have more of an ongoing dashboard where you can start to see how people are feeling and what kinds of internal and external factors are affecting it, then we can address it a lot more effectively. And to your point, I mean, that's the reason that platforms like 15.5 are so important, right? We need to start really enabling people to have these capabilities. And what I'm finding too is that as long as the end experience is really great for folks, they become less and less concerned about how is this being used? Why are you asking me? Like Netflix, right? It tracks everything that we click, scroll, how long we watch, but its ability to actually give us exactly what we're looking for negates. We're like, cool, then take all my information because it helps me. Right?
Exactly. It helps me not spend 30 minutes picking the next show that I'm going to watch. Right. Which is ultimately what we want. And that's, we've got, a question from someone in our audience too, just asking about examples of using AI day to day in their job. Like, what are some real practical ways that we can do that? And one thing I think is really important is if you are in HR, go out and find tools that are utilizing AI for not only your administrative benefit, which we know that matters, but for the end user experience. If you can use AI to create better engagement survey questions, cadences, better performance programs, ongoing conversations, that's the lift you need. It doesn't actually have to be that I open up ChatGPT at 9 a.m., 10:30, and 11 a.m. today. It's what are the tools that are utilizing this capability? Because AI is so much more than just the Geminis and the ChatGPTs of the world. There's a ton of capability out there. What are some ways, Loren, that you or your teams actually put this into practice day to day?
Yeah, it's been an evolution. If I compare my usage of AI tools even 12 months ago, I'm like, wow, I really wasn't doing anything, right? It's like I've evolved, but it's one of those things where you just kind of have to put in the reps. The first time that I opened up an LLM and sat there looking at this blank screen with the, prompt box, I was like, okay, now what, right? So it takes some getting used to and some warming up. And now, I've got it on my phone. I chat with my agents while I'm at the gym, so it very much becomes a part of your day. But what I found really effective, especially with my teams, was because, again, this is new for all of us. We started carving out bi-weekly sessions where folks in the office would get together and just exchange ideas of, hey, I started using it to do this, or hey, I came across this tool and used it to create an app that helps me, manage XYZ. And so it's impossible to do all that discovery on your own. So I would say find a way to make it a collective group effort and swap ideas, swap use cases, and feel free to make that exploration low stakes, meaning don't feel rushed to apply it to work right away. Find ways to maybe help it, use it to help to plan your next vacation or a trip to the grocery store, just little mundane things that help you understand how these tools work, how they're different, how you can start, linking them together before then feeling the pressure of using it to deliver something of importance, right? That has wider repercussions.
Exactly. We actually had a chat thread going on in our 15.5 Slack earlier this week, which makes you think of the learnfluencers you were talking about, where someone just asked, how are you all using AI in your life? What are some examples? And people just threw in there, here's a few things that I do at work. Here's a few things that I do at home. And it is, like you said, it's building the muscle. The more you see what other people are doing, the more it actually expands your mind to think about, oh, I could use it there. I felt that way the first 6 months I was using AIs. I would read something. I was like, oh, you can use it to generate a packing list for a beach vacation. I guess that's obvious, but I didn't know. I wouldn't have even thought of it, right? Or someone else was like, I gave it 6 recipes for Christmas. And I said, dinner has to be on the table at this time. Build me a timeline. And it did it. And once you do that, and to your point, low stakes, I mean, maybe your holiday dinner is not low stakes, depending on your situation, but whatever, a family barbecue friend thing, then you start to think, well, what if I did that in work? And what if I said, I have these programs I have to run this quarter. What are some things I should think about on timing, right? Like just start to get those baby steps moving in there.
How do we simultaneously encourage folks to use it, but then also put in some kind of guardrails around the usage and make sure that they're not putting in private company information into? So I think that's the space now that we're trying to figure out. I'm part of an HR kind of networking group, and we were having conversations just yesterday in our WhatsApp about, hey, does anyone know any, where I can go to figure out this whole kind of, compliance and kind of control around the usage of AI, which is a very real concern.
Yeah, definitely. Well, and, there's a lot of questions too about just overutilizing AI. And I do think that you got to learn that lesson on your own a little bit too. But obviously AI is not meant to replace every single thing you do and be your total, you and your voice. I think writing is one place. I remember in a past company, we had international offices, and oftentimes people used AI to help them write a message to someone in a country in a language that they weren't native to get something across. And we could always tell because it was this can't quite be what you're saying, or you wouldn't really say it this way, right? There's a level of using AI and then giving your own voice and screen to it. Don't just hit click and trust, verify, go back and make sure. And I always like to share with folks and with my team is, I think sometimes starting from the place of where will I not use AI? What are the systems or the programs or my interactions that I really want to protect to be a human to human moment? And sometimes if you start from there, it helps you think about, and certainly help me kind of wrestle and battle with what am I actually protecting and why am I protecting it? Where can I use AI and where do I really want to hold a ground that this is an important value for me to keep? And I know that we can keep going on and on all things AI. It's a topic that just gets everybody going. But I do think a lot of your advice here is just so important. And I think to your point earlier, Loren, just thinking about the tools that can help you leverage it, that can really bring you in the moment of what is happening with your employees and their sentiment, their feelings, their engagement versus these kind of old outdated rituals that are like clockwork, right? You plant a flag in the ground, you always have to come back to that flag instead of thinking, man, I wish I knew what the engineering team felt last week after that reorg. I wish I knew what my sales leaders were going through, knowing that they're having a tough quarter. Anything that you can pull from in real time will make such a difference. One other question I want us to get to before we wrap up here, Loren, is what is the advice you would give to an HR executive first day in their role, first new job? Would you help them prioritize thinking about the future of work?
It's always good practice and probably pretty standard when you step into these roles that step one is understanding the business that you're in, really and truly, how do we make money here, right? I think that we really need to revisit that in light of AI, right? How is this fundamentally going to change how we're going to market with our product or service? Because then that directly impacts, do we have the capabilities currently to deliver that in both, in our talent and the way that we're structured? I think those two things need to be radically rethought across all organizations. How and when we form teams, how we define jobs. Not every single job needs to be a full-time 9 to 5 in the scope. We really need to start blowing all of those things up and rethinking how the work gets done. I think that a lot of times we're jumping the boat on that and just going right into, okay, let's just upskill everyone on on AI or even things that were always the golden, right? Retention, right? All of our efforts were always centered around the ultimate goal of retention. And now I'm saying, do we need retention in this new world, right? Maybe we need a healthy churn because we can't develop people fast enough. We need some people out and introduce new skills. So I would just say, get back to the drawing board, really clean slate, erase, Control Alt Delete, and start over on a lot of these things.
That's amazing. And Loren, where can people connect with you if they want to hear more from you or hear more about your ideas on future of work?
Yeah, I would love that. So I'm very active on LinkedIn and Instagram. I'm a lot more fun on Instagram than a little more stuffy on LinkedIn. But yeah, happy to continue the conversation and would love to hear your thoughts in either one of those spaces.
That's amazing. We'll make sure to share your LinkedIn link. As I think about all that you shared today, Loren, so many incredible insights, but literally the last thing you said just applies to everything we talked about, which is blow it up. If you are doing something that you have repeated even once before, or you're using any type of system of framework that you rely on, take a second to just think about, why am I doing this? And does this actually fit what my company needs, what my people need? What can I do differently? You don't have to go and blow everything up at once. But if you just try one thing, right? Start with something you feel you can handle, you can grasp on, you'll start to build more of that confidence to try something new. And I think we will all be really surprised at the results. Thank you, Loren, so much for your time today. It was absolutely incredible to have you on.
Thank you.
Engaged employees are your most valuable asset. They're innovative, loyal, and committed to achieving exceptional results. By fostering a culture of engagement, you'll unleash their full potential and create a competitive advantage that sets your organization apart. But how do you do it? Check out 15Five's Employee Engagement Playbook linked in the show notes. It explores the undeniable benefits of employee engagement and dives deep into how to measure it. I promise you'll learn actionable strategies to transform engagement insights into measurable outcomes.